Hello, my name is Barbara Blaznik and I would like to represent you our poster presentation with the title Accelerated Photodegradation of Dye-Based Inkjet Printing Inks in Aqueous Solution and on Substrate. Photodegradation is an interactive process between light and material, since this process takes place only when the material can absorb light. Among the most crucial factors affecting the light fastness of a colorants are dye concentration, degree of aggregation, pigment particle size, chemical and physical structure of the printing material, energy between the colorant and the printing material, spectral distribution of the light source, and composition of the atmosphere including relative humidity as well as the presence of pollutants in the air. Therefore, prints made with an inkjet printer are perfect representation of a complex system in terms of print analysis, as they connect an infinite number of combination of printing materials, colorants, and other internal and external factors. The purpose of our research was to study the photodegradation of inkjet inks in aqueous solutions, as well as prints under the influence of high-pressure mercury lamp, which was used to accelerate the photodegradation process because exposure to the significant portion of UV radiation leads to accelerated chemical degradation of materials. The Epson printer that was included in our experimental part uses water-based inkjet printing inks. The printer contains 4 cartridges with 4 dye-based primary color inks, which were taken directly from the cartridge and diluted with the water. Also, prints were made with a resolution of 2400 dpi and were printed on a plain office and permanent paper. The figure on the side represents a high-pressure mercury lamp which was used to irradiate dye solutions of ink and prints. The lamp was water-cooled due to the heating of the lamp. On the left part of the figure, we can see irradiation of dye solutions. The right part of the figure represents detail of modification for irradiation of prints. This aperture was constructed to ensure a uniform distance from the irradiation source, and 50 ml of water was added to the reactor to maintain the temperature. All samples were exposed for 15 minutes. After the exposure of the liquid samples, the measurements of absorption in 2 repetitions in the range between 380 and 730 nanometers were performed. The ink amount was calculated according to the upper equation. In this equation, the IA represents the ink amount and A represents the absorption volume before and after irradiation. For prints, the measurements were performed in accordance with ISO standard. From the measured values of the reflection, the color difference were calculated using CAD 2000 equation, which is presented in the middle of the slide. According to the Beer-Lambert law, the ink amount of the prints was calculated according to the adapted equation, which is presented on the bottom of the slide. Here, the IA represents ink amount on the substrate and the R presents the reflection value before and after irradiation. The spectra presented are related to the color change after irradiation with a high-pressure mercury lamp for inkjet ink in aqueous solution. Considering the width of the absorption band, the number of absorption maxima, and the previous studies carried out on these samples, we conclude that the inks represent a mixture of different colorants used by manufacturer to achieve the desired ink properties. From the absorption spectra, we can also detect a shift of the absorption maxima towards shorter wavelengths, in the case of cyan, yellow, and black inks. And the absorption maxima decreased most for the black inks, for 18%, and least for cyan ink, 5%. The ink amount values show that the most significant change after irradiation occurred with the black ink in aqueous solution, as the amount decreased to 78% of the initial absorbance. By monitoring the rate of photodegradation, the degradation rate and half-life was also determined. The photodegradation reaction likely follows the pseudo first-order kinetic model. The degree of photodegradation was most notable in the case of the black and yellow inks. On the other hand, the degradation of cyan ink was less evident. For the substrate, the color differences and roughness changes are presented in table. From reflectance curves, we can conclude that office paper contains optical brightening agents which disintegrate after irradiation with a high-pressure mercury lamp. Therefore, changes in the color of the paper were observed mainly on the B-axis, as the hue of the paper shifted from slightly bluish towards yellow. After 15 minutes of irradiation, more significant differences in roughness were also measured for the office paper. On the permanent paper, we detected changes in a broader part of shortwave spectrum. Therefore, regarding color differences, we have noticed a slightly more significant difference in color on permanent paper. Figures presented on this slide present the reflectance curves for all prints, as well as so-called bronzing or redshift of cyan prints that occurred immediately after exposure. Bronzing of cyan disappeared after 24 hours. The phenomenon of bronzing of prints is usually the result of dye structural characteristics and some external factors such as ozone. The ozone was a byproduct of the operation of the high-pressure mercury lamp. Therefore, the reflection of all prints and substrates were measured twice, immediately and 24 hours after exposure. The comparison of the reflectance curve of prints show that the degradation was not so much dependent on printing material as on color used. The calculated values in table show ink amount and color differences of the prints. According to the results, changes in the value 24 hours after irradiation can be observed due to the bronzing of cyan prints. Also, the positive influence of printing material can be observed, since using permanent paper, the ink amount values are higher. Magenta prints are considered less durable. However, the use of permanent paper gave better results. Regarding the color differences of the prints, we find that the most significant color differences occurred on magenta prints. We can also find out how the value delta E changed 24 hours after the irradiation, especially on cyan prints, resulting from the bronzing of the cyan print after irradiation with UV lamp. In the case of magenta prints on office paper, we notice the delta E increased by almost 1 after 24 hours of irradiation. On the contrary, we can find that color differences of magenta on permanent paper are somehow more constant compared to prints on office paper. For the conclusion, we can say that the degradation process of inkjet inks in solution depends on internal factors such as dye's chemical structure, dye's catalytic effect, and the presence of various solvents in the accompanying liquid. According to the results, shortwave UVC radiation had no significant impact on the cyan ink in the solution or the prints. However, bronzing of cyan print indicates that several interrelated processes occur during the exposure to radiation, which can influence the durability of the prints and can also affect the testing procedure. In an aqueous solution, black ink exhibited inadequate durability, which was probably due to the catalytic effect due to some of the components, as black ink consists of a mixture of different colorants to achieve the desired color shade. However, the same ink mixture printed on paper did not show as significant color changes as in solution. Surprisingly, the magenta in the solution proved to be relatively stable. but it still holds first place among the least durable inks on the print, regardless of substrate used. Therefore, we conclude that when researching the fastness of prints, it is crucial to consider the composition of the ink, which is usually a mixture of several dyes that influence each other and behave unexpectedly in different environments. It is inevitable to consider both characteristics of dye or ink alone, as well as its resistance and durability when applied to the substrate.